everybody. This is Carol Maletta. Welcome to the Parenting 411 podcast, where we share information parents need from sources they can trust. Hey, Mama, if you've been holding it together on the outside, but feeling spiritually drained on the inside, I want to invite you to something special. The Ministry of Mom Experience is happening May 2nd in Washington, D.C. It will be a faith-centered day to help you reset, breathe, and walk away with practical tools to parent with confidence and peace. You don't need more pressure. You need an anchor and a plan. Register now at ministryofmom.com. That's ministryofmom.com. There are moments in life that shake the ground beneath us, and divorce is one of them. I can attest to that, having experienced that when I was in elementary school when my parents divorced. But it's not only an emotional unraveling, but also a financial crossroads where every decision carries weight. Many parents walk into this season overwhelmed, unsure of what they need to gather, what they need to prioritize, and just how to rebuild in this new reality. So it is in those moments that clarity matters most. But the choices you make today may shape your future and your child's future for years to come. So today I'm joined by someone who has spent more than 2 decades guiding women through these very challenging crossroads. Donna Cates is a financial advisor, wealth builder, and a certified divorce financial analyst whose passion is helping women make informed, confident decisions so they are no longer living in fear of not having enough. She understands the unique challenges women face during life transitions, and she brings both expertise and empathy to the process of rebuilding. So in this conversation, Donna's going to help us peel back the emotional fog and just uncover the practical steps that support stability, dignity, and long-term financial well-being. So whether you are contemplating divorce, you are actively navigating it, or perhaps supporting someone who is, this episode will give you the tools to make the decisions that protect what matters most. So welcome, Donna, and thank you so much for joining me.
I appreciate it, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
So let's dive in and just talk about, what are some of the biggest financial blind spots that parents faced early on in the process, especially when it comes to understanding the short-term versus the long-term impact of the decisions that they're making?
That is such a good question. And I will tell you that most people, when they're ready to divorce, they're overwhelmed by all of the decisions that they have to make. And they find, at least my experience has been, a lot of women discover that they don't really know what their financial reality is. They may not know whether they have life insurance coverage in place, whether they, have a mortgage on their home, anything about the money. So that's the big blind spot. And we get into the emotional decision making versus looking at the financial reality. And that can be a big pitfall, because when we're reacting from that emotional standpoint, we're just literally ignoring the financial reality and whether or not we're going to be able to sustain whatever it is we're asking for in divorce.
Yeah, I can imagine, because in that moment, all they know is, I don't want to be with this person. And
Right.
That's, like you said, that whole emotional part, especially if there's a particular incident. Or now what I wonder, though, is if it's a case where something's been building, or maybe it's just a growing unease, or I don't know, a growing apart. Do you find that those people are a little more prepared than those who are responding to something that just recently happened and they just want to make a change immediately?
Yeah, the person that actually initiates the divorce process is always in the advantage, because They've
Okay.
had more time to think about it.
Okay.
They didn't just wake up today and say, "Hey, I want a divorce." They've been
Okay.
thinking about this for, months or years. So they've
Okay.
been planning and putting things in place. So now if it's a contentious situation and you're both going, "Yeah, this marriage is not working," it may be
Uh-huh.
that y'all have both been having conversations about it. But the person that's at the disadvantage is the one that is totally blindsided by the announcement that their spouse wants to divorce. Because
Okay.
now, while their spouse has been working on it emotionally, coming to the decision, getting the financial information together, now this party is going, "Okay, what? You want what?"
Okay.
And we
Okay.
have a lot of catching up to do. So that's one thing, depending on who initiated divorce or how you came into that conversation, we really kind of need to have an equalization where we give each other space to catch up. A lot of people don't, take the time to give the
Mhm.
other partner time to catch up with them.
Wow. That's that's a good point. And so what key documents or financial information should a parent gather before making any decisions about separating or actually agreeing to a settlement
Got it.
if they've gotten that far?
Yeah, and this is really important. And the work that I do as a CDFA is very, very helpful to people. If you kind of think about, when you hire an attorney, that's the first person most of us think of when we're filing for divorce is getting the divorce attorney. But that's not
Yeah.
necessarily the most logical place to start because you might need, counseling. You definitely need help with the money stuff. And then you could probably use a divorce coach that's going to kind of help you understand the process well and navigate that process.
Wow, that's
And I
so
think
interesting because a lot of people head straight to the lawyer.
I
Wow.
know, right. And this is the thing is that, with the financial information, and this is what I ask your listeners to consider. Divorce attorneys, the job that you're hiring them to do is to divide everything that y'all currently have, assets, debts, sharing the income. So that's what they're doing. They're taking a razor blade and slicing it down the middle, making it as equitable as they can. What
Okay.
they're not trained to do is to understand and help you understand what the financial impact is going to be of all of the different settlement options. So that's what we do is look at, gathering all the financial document. What are the income sources? It's maybe not just your job. Do you have rental property? Is there a business? What are
Mhm.
all the income sources? Then we look at what are your expenses? What's going out? What's coming in versus what's going out? And then we
Mhm.
need to have all records of all of the bank accounts, savings, the credit card statements, the mortgage statements, the investment statements, the 401ks, all of those types of financial documents, your will, so we can see, what's in place already. We can't have enough information in order to help you understand what your financial situation look like today. But
Mhm.
if we can gather all that financial information, and especially if we can do it before you meet with your attorney,
Mhm.
chances are we can save you a lot of money because you've been able to gather that information yourself and you're not having to pay your attorney to ask the other attorney
Mhm.
or the partner's attorney himself, for the financial information.
And, I wonder, it seems like coming to someone like you also can kind of help to tamp down some of the emotions that affect the choices that you make when you're sitting in the attorney's office, because there's some things like I can imagine that there could be women who maybe give up too much or something just because they just want the situation settled, but they haven't really thought through what the financial implications would be of their decision. Or maybe I don't know, I can't imagine the situation, but where they're holding on to something that doesn't make sense. Like it would make sense to concede on that particular point based on some way that it would affect them or their children. So what can help parents think more strategically and clearly about their financial choices and not allowing those emotions to get into the way?
And it's a huge situation to overcome because we're all emotional beings and we're in this emotional process of dissolving the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first tip I have is to not ignore your emotions. We have to deal with them. We have to learn from them in order to, be able to pick up and move on and rebuild after divorce. But when you're in the divorce process, I ask people, to have that person, whether it's a good friend, confidant, a counselor, somebody that you can express all the emotions with so that we can process that because it's got to be dealt with. But then when you're meeting with your other financial professionals or your divorce attorney, it's kind of like we got to put the blinders up for the emotional piece. Now, not that we aren't empathetic professionals, we're going to be right there with you. But what we want to do is use our time with these professionals in the most practical way that we can. And if we're having to come apart because he didn't bring the kids home on time, after the weekend visit, and we're spending 30 minutes crying with the attorney, that's an expensive session, right? So we
Right.
literally, it's kind of like, just think about it. I'm going into a business meeting right now. I've got to put on my business hat.
Business.
And if you can
Yes.
have that kind of mindset, that's helpful. But the thing that I think the most important thing to think about is before you start arguing over what you're going to keep, what your spouse is going to get, what you may have to give up, is to always focus on you want to do what is best for yourself financially and for your kids. So if you are making smart financial decisions for yourselves, you're making informed decisions, that's going to make you a more stable, financially stable parent. And having a financially stable parent is definitely going to benefit the kids because they get all the feeds. They're like little sponges. Whether it's something we're speaking or just the stress in the situation, they get the message of what's good and what's not. So,
Mm-hmm.
doing what you have to do to not only divide the assets, but to make sure that the way you're dividing those assets and resources are going to support you over the long term, not just the day the divorce is finalized.
And you said something very important in there, an important word, and that was business. And I know a lot of people wouldn't want to think of it that way, but you are ending a partnership because during the time that you were married, you were working together very much. You were bringing your assets together, your income together to run this enterprise that is your household. And it wasn't just day to day expenses, but perhaps, like you said, you were making investments, you were saving, you had plans. So that can really help people take the emotion out of it, I think, when they look at it that way, because it's very real. That resources and finances that you really have to dispose of, or not dispose of, but distribute and all of that. So business, I think that word is very important to think about because it was a family enterprise.
Well, and if I can interject this here, a lot of times, and I have this come up a lot, because people have to pay for our services, right? Me
Sure.
as a certified divorce financial analyst, divorce attorney, everybody's getting paid for their area of specialty. But
Hmm.
people will balk at, my attorney wants a $5,000 or $10,000 retainer. I can't afford that. And I
Yeah.
always take them back to their wedding. Okay. How much did you
Oh.
spend on that wedding? And maybe they didn't pay for it all. They might have had parents, helping. But if you look at the total investment you made in getting married and the fact that the very first document that you signed together was a contract, a marriage license. So
Right.
it is a business
Hmm.
from day
Hmm.
one.
Right. Right. So You mentioned we talked a little bit about the children, obviously. So, how should parents approach then protecting their children's financial future, especially when you're thinking about education planning, K through 12, but you also have to think about college?
Right. So there are a lot of moving pieces here, and the reality that I want to start with is that your state has a formula for calculating child support, and that's
Oh,
literally based off of your earnings.
okay.
So the thing that every parent needs to know is that child support isn't designed to take care of every living expense that your child has. And kids are expensive. The child support is designed for those day-to-day living, putting a roof over their head, feeding them, that type of thing. But what's typically not addressed in the divorce decree, and we need to make sure it is in yours, is how are we going to handle all the extras, the extracurricular activities? What if my child needs a tutor? What if my child is in the band and is going on band trips and needs to buy an instrument? All of those kinds of expenses. Now, and when you have younger children, we don't know what those are going to be yet. But a simple way to approach that is to, take your total household income. Let's say that one party is contributing 30% to the
Hmm.
household and the other is 70%. You might agree that any of these extra childhood expenses are going to be divided between the two of you on that 30-70 split. Now, some attorneys will just automatically say 50-50. Hey, if
Right.
they going to go to the doctor, the copay's $20, you're going to pay 10, your spouse is going to pay 10. But if there is a big discrepancy in income, it's not unreasonable to ask for that ratio to be adjusted to accommodate that. But you need to address that in the divorce decree. Now, when it comes to private schooling and the K-1 through 12, that's something that y'all are going to have to negotiate as well. Most states do not address who's going to be responsible for paying for the child's college simply because they're no longer minors. Once they get into college,
Oh,
they're 18, and most states are either 18 or 19 is the age of majority. So the
gotcha.
courts are saying we can't dictate that you as the parent are going to provide for your children's education. That does not mean that you can't agree to it. So if, a lot of people will have 529 savings accounts, the
Hmm.
college education savings.
Hmm.
So only one person is the owner of that account. So one of the two of you have opened it. So you would retain that account for the benefit of your child. So
Hmm.
a couple of things that you would want to be discussing in your degree is who's going to be funding it? Are we just going to keep the money that's in there now, and then when they use it, that's what gets used first? Or
Hmm.
are we each going to continue to contribute to it? And if so, how much? If I'm not the owner of the 529 account,
Hmm.
it make me the successor owner, because if something happens to the original owner, we want to
Good
know that
point.
we still have control over it. So those are some of the things that you definitely want to take into consideration specifically to the kids' financial needs.
Want to give your skin that lifted, luminous look? Like you just came back from summer vacation? Listen, I know the leaves are turning, but Dermalogica's Phyto Nature Firming Serum does exactly that. With dual phase technology powered by botanicals like camu, Moroccan rock rose, and hyaluronic acid, it helps firm, hydrate, and turn back the clock on tired skin. It's clinically proven to double your skin's luminosity after just one use, and it smooths out lines in just 4 weeks. I use mine, and it's a total game changer for me. So click the link in the notes and grab this deal at Ulta. And trust me, your skin will thank you.
It's so interesting. I'm sitting here listening to you talk about this, and I'm just thinking about how this whole, if I could say, business of divorce has evolved. Because, as I said, my parents divorced in the 70s when I was in elementary school, and I'm fairly certain, just from my recollection, even though I was young, just based on the conversations they had. I don't believe that they discuss things like my extracurricular activities, and I was in quite a few. Did not talk about, well, I went to public school, so it didn't really come up about me going to private school. Although, there was a consideration that I would go at one point. I ultimately didn't, but that was definitely not in their decree, and college either. In terms of, and that may go to what you said about them not normally covering it unless you discuss it, but that clearly wasn't discussed. So that's really, really interesting because it was really primarily, I think, for my brother and I to just the day to day
Right,
expenses. It
right.
really was
Mhm.
nothing, household expenses. It really was nothing about the things that we did outside. And, thankfully my mother found a way to make sure that we could do the outside activities, but, that wasn't covered. It
Right,
didn't
right.
include it. I mean,
Mhm.
I know how much it was, and there's no way there's
Right.
no way it covered the stuff that we were able to do.
Right.
So, I'm glad to see that it's really evolved, and I guess I've had a sense that it's evolved somewhat too when you think about some of these high profile divorces that get
Mhm.
covered in the media, and people have all of these debates about these exorbitant amounts of payments that people have. So that leads me to really my next question, and that is what the common mistakes are that parents make when they're trying to maintain the same lifestyle
Mhm.
for their children during and after the divorce, and what should they do instead? Because that comes up a lot, as I said, in those high profile divorces. It's, well, they have to maintain the lifestyle they were accustomed to. Sometimes that even comes up in terms of alimony, whether it's the wife having to pay the husband or the
Mhm.
husband having to pay the wife.
Well, and I think the first thing for people to consider, and this isn't rocket science, we all know it if we slow down and think about it. You're taking one household
Mhm.
that has either one or two incomes. The
Mhm.
incomes aren't going to change, but now you got two households. So that means
Mhm.
two refrigerators, two sets of clothes for the kids because they got to have clothes at one parent's house and clothes at the other parent's. Um,
Mhm.
so the expenses are going to be there. We just need to make sure that we're prepared. And the reality is, unless your income is going up, unless you go out and get a different job or earn more money, the
Mhm.
lifestyle may be impacted. And that's where, when we're going through the work that I do and helping you understand the outflow, what your living expenses are is really important because we
Mhm.
can define, where's your money going now? And you'll see, oh my gosh, I had no idea I was spending $250 a month on cable television or
Mhm.
streaming, right?
Mhm.
I had
Mhm.
no idea it was that much. Well, if post divorce, if we need to find ways to scale back, having gone through that exercise will be helpful to you because you can go and say, well, here are some things I'm subscribing to I don't really need, or I never use that gym membership, or, whatever the things are. So it helps you to kind of tune in for ways to improve. But I think, the big thing is to know that your financial reality is going to shift, but it's not the end of the world. It's just an adjustment, and
Mhm.
in making decisions on what assets you're going to be receiving is crucial to this too, because these are assets that are going to be growing for you to help you with your financial future. So understanding, does it make sense to keep the house? Would it make more sense for us to sell the home, divide the proceeds, and each get our own new home? We need to understand all of the financial moving pieces to that.
Mhm. Mhm. So I'm wondering if there's a parent today that's feeling overwhelmed and just unsure of how to get started. Let's recap or introduce, if you haven't said it so far, what the first practical step would be to gain clarity and confidence and get started.
I would tell you, if I were in your shoes and I was just now thinking about or in the middle of divorce, I would want to get as much financial information organized as I could, and have a conversation with your spouse if the two of you are able to speak about it together, to collaborate on pulling together the financial information, because that will save you a ton of money. There are a lot of checklists available. I've got what I call the Ultimate Divorce Toolbox available on my website that helps you map out everything from parenting scheduling, what's most important to you as far as vacation time or holiday time. What are the things that are important to you about keeping the home? It literally kind of helps you think through things versus just going, okay, well, I'm going to make a list. So that's a good tool, but there are a lot of resources available. But doing the research earlier versus waiting until you're in that, I have to do something right this minute because the legal process is in process, is just going to help you be a little bit more grounded and making more informed decisions.
Well, that sounds beautiful, especially if you're able to get along. And it might even cool off some of the emotions with your spouse if you come at it that way. Like, look, I get it. You don't want to be married anymore. Let's see how we can make this work for both of us. Okay. But some people aren't in that situation. Like, they don't like each other, and regardless of who initiated it, or for whatever reason, they are not collaborating like that. So what would you tell a wife would be her first practical step to moving forward with clarity and confidence if it's just not an option for her to say, hey, husband, this is what we ought to do?
My words of encouragement would be to reach out to the professionals who can help you. You don't have to walk the path alone, but having somebody on your team who can help you identify the things that you already know versus what you don't know. And so that now when you go to meet with your attorney, you're not just showing up saying, I have no idea what's what. You can say, these are the things that I already have. I know we've got this bank account, this 401k, here's our mortgage statement, but these are all the things I don't know. We've got a business. I have no clue what it's valued at. But, working with someone like me will help you kind of get those things organized so we know what you know, what you don't know. Now you know what to ask your attorney to help facilitate you getting the information on.
And so what about those women who feel like, especially at the beginning of the process, maybe they don't have the money. They need the help from somebody like you, but the best they can see, they just don't have the money. It's not being cheap. It's just like, hey, like maybe they weren't even working, for example. Right. Don't have an income, but they really need the help from somebody like you. Do you direct them towards some resources? What happens to a mom like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will tell you that I coach people on how to find money when they say they can't afford a service.
Okay.
Because
I like it.
Well, and this is the thing, is that we all have stuff laying around our house that we don't need. Now, it may not be easy. We can go sell stuff on Facebook Marketplace or eBay or whatever, but there are ways to come up with assets. And here's the thing too, and a lot of women don't know this, especially if you don't already have a credit card in just your name. That's the first thing that you need to do. And you have permission to use the family or joint credit card to pay for any services that you use. And then you can negotiate who's going to be financially responsible for paying those. But you have permission to use the savings. You have permission to use the money, the credit card that you have. But if you don't have a credit card in your name yet, that's what you want to apply for post haste, because when you do a credit card application, they're not approving you just on your income. They're actually looking at the total household income. So right now you're still married. I may only earn 30,000, but if my husband earns 200,000, I'm going to get a little bit more credit if I'm using the household income for that as well. So that's a big tip right there.
It sure is.
And again, it's we find a way. We're women, we raise kids, and we make things happen, just like you were talking about your parents covering things, even though the child support didn't, take care of it all. So don't think that you can't afford it. Let's at least have a conversation and get strategic about how we can find that extra money for you to get the support you need.
Yes, thank you for that, because I can just imagine, as it is, so many of them already think, oh, lawyer fees. They've already jumped there. But the kind of support that you provide, and then you even mentioned a divorce coach, which I have interviewed on this show before. I can just imagine them thinking that that's just way out of reach for them. But it would be so helpful in this process. It would make things so much easier. And as you pointed out, could possibly save them money at the divorce lawyer's office.
Absolutely. And one other resource I want to mention, because this is a free resource, I do a monthly divorce workshop. It's held virtually. It is only for women. That's the only restriction. But anybody in the U.S. can attend. But in that workshop, it's about 2 hours and 45 minutes. So it's an investment of your time, but no financial cost. But we have a counselor that talks about the emotional issues and how to take good care of yourself and your children, even your adult children, because they're impacted as well. And then we have a divorce attorney that educates us on all of that legalese that we don't understand. And then we also have myself, serving as a financial professional, explaining the common financial pitfalls and how to avoid them, and information data gathering. And that's totally free, other than your time investment.
Wow. I mean, just in such a relatively short period of time, you have shared so much information that I think would be helpful to many women who are at various positions on this spectrum of just thinking about divorce or just being confronted with a spouse telling them they want a divorce, to initiating the divorce or completing it. So I think you've dropped some breadcrumbs here for all of these women. So I want to ask, how can parents connect with you and access your guidance throughout the different platforms that you operate on?
Absolutely. My website is moneymatterswealth.com. You can find all of my resources there. And I am on all the social media platforms, Money Matters Wealth Solutions, and my name, Donna Cates. So you can find me on all the social platforms too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Donna, for bringing such clarity and compassion to a season that can really feel overwhelming for so many parents. It's an unpleasant time in your life, really. And I know that your insights can really remind us that informed decisions create steadier futures for ourselves as well as for our children. And so I hope today's conversation empowers every listener to move forward with confidence and care on this journey. I know you don't want to be on it, but I believe that Donna has really planted some seeds to really get you thinking about how you can navigate this. By all means, like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends. Remember to follow us at the Parenting 411 on all of the socials. And I can't wait to talk to you again. Until then, remember that it's never too late to be the parent you want to be. Thank you. Can't wait to talk to you all again next time.
We bring you this episode for the purpose of information and entertainment only. It is not the intent or purpose of the Parenting 411 podcast or Carol Maletta to provide an exhaustive reference or guide on all aspects of parenting, childcare, and family life. You are strongly encouraged to read all available information, consult medical or other appropriate professionals, and pursue all reasonable means to learn as much as possible about parenting, to complement what you gain here, and then tailor the information to meet your individual needs. Yes, parenting is a serious matter, though it is not an exact science. The context and insights offered in this and every episode represent an account of knowledge and personal experiences of the host and any featured guests for the viewers' and listeners' information and consideration. The host and guests do not guarantee to our viewers or listeners any specific parenting outcomes from this episode or taking actions described here.